Hey folks, David Benson here. Just wanted to chat with you. Thought this might be helpful to talk about this eviction moratorium that's around. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and I certainly had to educate myself on it. I don't claim to be any kind of expert on this topic, but in doing some research, I thought I would kind of bullet point what I found out as a local investor and thought it might be somewhat helpful. You know, as a landlord, I'm just like, well, anybody that isn't paying, we're just kind of stuck. We can't evict them. And in talking with management companies, that seems to be the feedback that I was getting. Well, they're pushing it back. Sorry, nothing we can do. There are some things we can do, and I'm going to share with you what I found out. First off, they have to sign an addendum. And the only way they can sign this addendum that's going to protect them under the CDC is if they qualify for a couple things. One is they tried to get government assistance and didn't get it, you know, or at least they're making some effort to do that, which if they're making that effort as a landlord, I'm going to work with them. You know, no landlord wants to kick them out of the house. I certainly want to collect rent and continue the relationship. What we're just trying to do as landlords is make sure that we've got bills to pay. You know, we've got a mortgage, we've got responsibilities in terms of maintaining the property. So we want to make sure that the agreement is upheld. So one is they're trying to get assistance. Now the kicker on that is they don't have to prove that they tried to get assistance. They just have to swear that they are. The other one, which is kind of the universal, is maybe they have to make 99,000 or swear to the statement that they make less than 99,000. In North Carolina, that's most everybody. So pretty much they're going to fall under that. The other one is substantial loss of income. Again, they don't have to prove that they lost their job, and there's no real guideline to it, but generally the rule of thumb is 20 to 40% loss of income. Last one I saw, tenant argues that if they didn't qualify for any of those other three, hey, if I move out, my rent's going to go up. I'm going to have to move into a homeless shelter. I'm going to be exposed to, or more likely to be exposed to, COVID-19. So if they meet that category, this whole thing is to try to protect, not us as landlords, protect the tenants, and then also to try to, you know, waylay this pandemic as it stands. As a landlord, just be aware that at any point they can sign this affidavit and be protected under the CDC if they qualify under that. So if you've gotten an eviction and you're just waiting to get the sheriff out there, they can stop it. If the sheriff's zone is way out there, they can stop it. If you're standing in front of the magistrate, they can stop it. So generally, if they've got one of these forms, affidavits, you know what the magistrate's going to do. That's a given. But just be aware, it doesn't just happen at the magistrate. Even if they've ruled in your favor, until they're locked out, it's still, you know, out there. Now, can they be placed back in after they've been evicted? There's no precedence for that. So once they're out, you've gone through the motions, they can't get back in, which that would be very rare. So 5 things that you can do to attempt to get a troubled, let's just put it this way, 5 things that aren't covered under the CDC, and then I'll give you kind of some of my ideas. Criminal activity, drugs, I don't know, any kind of criminal activity. I'm just trying to think of what you could prove, because what I recommend is whenever somebody doesn't pay, I would immediately schedule an inspection to go out and see the house. You know, we are entitled as landlords to whatever your lease says. You know, if you've got to give them 24 hours or 48 hours to take a look at your property, you are entitled to have access to your property. If they don't comply with that, then that's a violation of the lease, which we'll get into that one in a sec. If you have an apartment or if they're threatening other tenants, that's not covered under the CDC. If you can document that, maybe like a police report or something like that, the magistrate's going to uphold that, hopefully. At least it's not protected under here. Damaging the property. So when you go out there to do the inspection, if there is blatant damage having been done to the property outside of just normal wear and tear, you've got a pretty strong argument. Now, as a landlord, of course, we're going to go to them and say, hey, listen, this has been damaged. You've got X amount of time to remedy the situation and fix it, and we'll come back out and verify that's done. So it could be a lengthy process, but if we're looking at a 60-day moratorium and they've destroyed something in the house, and you give them 2 weeks to fix it and they don't do it, it's a strong case for going into the magistrate and saying, listen, they're going to continue to damage my property. We need to kind of stop the bleeding. Not covered. Violating the building code, let's say, for example, and I was trying to think of an example of this. The only one I could come up with, and I'm sure there's more, but let's say they have like a camper that is a violation of the HOA, and you can prove that, then obviously you're going to give them notice and go through all the steps to make sure that they've gotten, you've given them ample time to remedy the situation. But if they just refuse to do it, that's a violation. But the biggest one that I see is any other obligation to the lease outside of payment. So if they have a pet and there's no pet addendum, you ask them to sign a pet addendum and pay the pet deposit or whatever the policy is. But that is a violation of the lease. If you want them out, then there's a strong case. If there are people that are living in the property that aren't on the lease, and that's one of the requirements for the lease, that is a violation of the lease. There's a number of these, including allowing you access to the property. If they're not allowing you to access to the property to inspect what you own, violation of the lease. It's not protected under CDC. The other thing that's not protected, which is good, is late fees. So the tenant needs to understand that this is not rents going away. This is simply deferring the inevitable. So if your tenant gets 3 or 4 months behind, they are going to be required to catch that up, as well as late fees. So, I recommend, and what I do is make sure that my tenants understand that they're building this balance, that in order to stay in this property, more than willing to work with them, but there is going to be a balance due at the end of this, whenever that might be. One other thing that's a gray area, and I'm just going to leave it at that, is what happens if the lease expires, and is that protected under the CDC? It's not clear. That's a gray area. So if the lease is expired, can you evict them? I just don't know, and neither does does legal aid, because there hasn't been any precedents yet that I've heard of. There may be at this point, but hopefully that's helpful, and just some ideas. Leave your comments below. I'm curious as to any questions that arise. I think it's beneficial as we as real estate owners kind of pull our knowledge together. So hopefully this was helpful, and if so, let me know, and talk to you later.